The Crystal Charter, Daughter of the Red Seal. Read and written by Rebecca Sewell. Chapter 16. The trio traipsed into the city. To all eyes that may be curious, they looked like wary travellers who had taken a wrong turn through the mountain pass. Mouse stowed his royal jacket in his torn bag, and Till clasped the ragged cloak tightly in front of him, hiding his filthy clothes underneath it. If anyone observed them too closely, they would see the way that Till's feet pushed against the fabric where his knees should be, and how it would drag underneath his hovering lumber. Maebe guided them through the outskirts of the city towards the magic quarter. Wonderful smells of cooked fresh fish drifted around them from the food wagons. Mouse threw a handful of red shards at the first stall they passed, and the three of them gorged on doughy balls filled with blue crab meat and sweet citrus sauce. Standing underneath the awning of the cellar, they wiped sticky fingers on their ruined clothes and ordered a fresh dozen every time they scoffed one lot away. They ran out of shards before they filled up, and the sellers of Clest weren't interested in gold. Mouse decided to ask the vendor if he had a flitter he could borrow. On trust, not payment, since they couldn't even buy any more food, and he wanted to send a message to Edic. The owner refused in the most unpolite of manners, with several imaginative hand gestures, accompanied by shouting. Maebe grabbed Mouse's hand and dragged him away to prevent him donning his shabby blue jacket and making a fool of himself and the crown. "We'll be there soon. They're closer than walking up the cliff sides to the inn, and they'll let us borrow a flitter," she promised him. "Where are we going?" Mouse finally demanded, as Maebe led them down the shopping street for a second time. "The flower shop by the hollow," came Maebe's curt reply. She was busy searching the gaps beside each building to make sure she didn't miss the wagon. "We've walked past the flower shop twice. How is a flower shop going to help us anyway?" Mouse snorted. "We could have made it back to the inn by now. Even if Edic isn't there, Lilov can locate him." "Don't lie. Even in a carriage we wouldn't be there yet, and looking like this. I doubt one would take us. And it's not the flower shop we want, just someone who lives nearby," Maebe said, as she peered down the alley beside the flower shop for the fourth time. Fading under the late afternoon light, the wagon took shape. Tucked between a tumbled-down wall and an ancient oak, vines growing from the surroundings blended into painted replicas on wooden panels. The creeping plants tied the wagon to the tree. "There!" Maebe pointed. The wagon's rounded top had been painted with grey cloud formations and delicate silver raindrops. The front painted with overlaying patterns of flowers, added over the fading floral patterns of several attempts at refreshing the paint. Maebe had once helped add a layer of her own to the discordant colours. She stepped to the hidden steps that sprouted as she approached, and flung the purple wooden door open without knocking. Inside was cramped and dark, but she flowed into her old routine. It had been months since she had last seen the wagon, the longest time she had ever been without visiting, but she knew it as well as Spesseth Manor. "My wondrous storm cloud! It's raining heavily today," she called into the darkness. "I have new visitors, too." The tiny room expanded before their eyes. Mouse leaned forward, peering at the inside as it grew, whilst the wagon remained the same from the outside. A menagerie of colours bloomed before them, into the shapes of plants, bones, crystals, and ornaments. Furniture popped into the gaps that appeared, clutter covering every surface. The carpet at Maebe's feet used its tassels to pull itself across the floor, expanding its weave vibrance out. A galaxy of enchanted mess exploded before them. Herb smoke drifted through the open door, wrapping ghostly fingers around Mouse and Tiliphy. Till's eyes watered at the magic on display before them. Where am I? Where am I? He stuttered. His voice cracked on the word, but Mouse placed a firm hand on his shoulder and stilled his own face against the wariness that lurked beneath. I don't speak Sand Dragon like May, but I know enough to know what that means. These aren't warlocks, Mouse informed Till. Although they sure like showing off. I can see why they're friends of May's, he muttered to himself. Till shivered and held Mouse's arm tight. Not bad, just witches, Mouse repeated in a louder voice. Maebe tutted at him from inside the door, rolling her eyes. This is who I think it is, he asked Maebe, standing straight. He shook his arm to knock Till loose, but the boy held on. It is, Maebe beamed, then switched to Sand Dragon for Tiliphy's sake. Charis and Hannah are the only two nature witches dwelling in the Green Kingdom. They're my dearest friends. They won't hurt you. They are good witches. They heal and grow plants. They can even predict the weather. They might be able to help with... Maebe gestured to his hidden feet. Tiliphy didn't look reassured. He let go of Mouse to pull the cloak tighter over his hexed feet. Chewing on his lip, he let Mouse push him inside the plum door. It swung shut behind them, banishing the bright sunlight and the fresh air, leaving them in a dim glow with the cloying herb smoke filling their lungs. Their eyes adjusted, taking in the full bedlam of the place. Geometric glass jars of strange plants hung above them, so thick the dark ceiling was barely visible. A shallow bowl of water rested on the table by the door and vibrated gently. The shining liquid floated up into the shape of an arrow, pointing towards a wall which opened to allow them through. Maebe had to duck in places because of her height. Huge tapestries clung to the walls and ceiling, weaved with images of flowers, witches, the phases of the moon, and congruent patterns. Piles of mostly drained crystals were stacked on every surface. Heaps of books and other clutter appeared as the hallway continued to stretch on. Mouse shrieked, a completely undignified sound for a prince to make, and pulled his knife free. Till grabbed Maebe tightly, pressing his face into her torn sleeve. Before Mouse sat a huge cat, its waist-height face pulled back as though he would hiss, silver eyes focused on his weapon. Zarlad's fur reminded Maebe of stormy skies, perfect blends of every shade of grey, and the crystals jutting from his head and spine flashed like lightning. Mouse, stop it. Put the knife away. He's a crystal sphinx. He's checking to see if you mean him any harm. It's Charis's familiar, Zarlad, she murmured as she dropped to her knees. Crystal sphinxes were kept by the scholar witches of Sandragas to guard the guild. Royalty and other witches of importance kept their own crystal sphinx pairs as guardians of their private quarters. They had the ability to judge a person's intentions and communicate with those that they trust using the magic they could generate with their own biological crystals. The people of Sandragas who could not afford the protection of such magical creatures often bought small statues of them, placed either side of their door in an imitation charm of the Scholar Guild guardians. Zarlad cast one unnerving judgmental glance towards Mouse as he sheathed his weapon, then pressed his jagged head against Maebe and began purring like a brewing storm. Till transferred his terrified affection to Mouse as the cat neared her. She scratched the fur behind his ears before standing back up. Zarlad dashed into the shadows of the room to inform his master that they were welcome. "Is that good?" Mouse asked, eyeing the spot that the cat had vanished through. "You'd know if it was bad," Maebe laughed. On the table before them, another bowl of water tremoured. The liquid swirling around the citrine inside directing them to enter a room with another shivering arrow. Maebe gestured for them to follow her, keeping an eye for carved patches on the ceiling. Mouse grabbed Till tightly on the shoulder, and they shuffled along behind her. Books and trinkets appeared, obstructing the continuously expanding floor and forcing them to follow a swerving path. At the end was a room Maebe was familiar with. A witch with the most peculiar hair sat on her heels with her back to them, tending a huge plant. Half of her head was pink as spring flowers, and the other half as green as ivy. Thick stems of the plant she held tremored as it purred along with the witch's humming. Her damp fingers ran along its great red, orange, and gold leaves. The crotacea thrives in high humidity, but I like to pamper mine and apply moisture directly into it at least once a week as well. Look at those beautiful colours, the witch admired. She turned, and the plant straightened to the ceiling, brushing against the charms and paper enchantments hanging above them from every inch. Her eyes were split to match her hair, one pink, one green. Oh, I didn't realise you weren't alone. I guess Charis knows you brought guests. You all look awful, did you know? Till had slid behind Mouse as much as he could physically manage, trembling as he clung to the prince's shirt. Mouse kept his eyes straight ahead, face unnatural in its neutrality. The only reaction he allowed himself upon seeing Hannah's unique appearance was a slow blink. It was enough to make Maebe want to chuckle. Sorry, Hannah. This is Mouse, and the little one is Tiliphy. I was wondering, do you have a flitter we could borrow? Mouse needs to send an urgent message. Maebe queried, but the witch's wide eyes had fallen on the uncomfortable prince. Mouse? Wait, you're Prince Mouse? You brought a member of the royal family here? Her anxious face glanced at the plant she had been using raw magic to maintain, even though Maebe knew Mouse only thought that she had been stroking it. Mouse offered a tight smile at being referred to as Maebe's, but it died quickly as the witch continued speaking. I hope you're here to talk to Ahilar. You know, he refuses to meet with me. If I had my way, I swear I would lecture him on inappropriate uses of magic. I know he keeps within the laws of this realm, but honestly, just because you can, or even possibly can, doesn't necessarily mean that you should. There is a finite amount of crystal left to be mined. They don't grow quickly, you know. You should tell your father that magic isn't a Butterfly, you're being irate? Purred a rich voice from the corner. A dark witch melted into the room from the shadows, jewellery on her arms and at her throat jangling with their weight. The atmosphere of the room shifted to the calm pressure before a storm arrives. Charis slithered her hypnotic wine-coloured eyes over everybody. All focus was drawn to the palm-sized purple crystal mounted on her forehead. A delicate wire frame wrapped the crystal tight and vanished into the loose braid of smooth walnut-coloured hair. She limped into the room, leaning heavily on a grey cane, topped with another crystal, the deep blue of a stormy night. Zalad sauntered in behind her, radiating the strength of pride that only a cat could muster. Just because I'm a little sensitive at the moment does not mean I'm not right, Hannah huffed. Zalad sniffed Mouse once, then ignored him entirely as his feline stare fixed on the scrawny boy behind him. He vanished from the room through the invisible door that Charis had appeared from. Her familiar's reaction caused the dark witch to raise a questioning eyebrow towards the prince. Charis raised a hand, as if waiting for Mouse to kiss it. He stared at her curled-up slender fingers, then looked into her expressionless face. A flitter, as you requested. Right, and release it by the window over there, she drawled with a sly smile. Her hand turned up to reveal a filigree silver device in her palm. She gestured at a small desk under a sunny opening which appeared in the ceiling. My name is Charis, but I do believe you've heard of me, Prince Marcellus. I'm afraid my butterfly over there, Hannah, is going through the season change at the moment. It is a physical and emotionally demanding change, so she's not fully herself. I think that should be obvious, Hannah sulked. Don't expect humans to know the ways of witches, especially ones as unique as you, Charis said with a loving smile. Maybe. You brought a boy here, and you have urgent news. Tell me. Charis ordered Maebe. A ring of plush chairs appeared behind each person, a wide table between them all. Come here. Maebe held her hand out to Tiliphy, who had hidden partially behind Mouse's chair. He refused to move, so Mouse picked him up and placed him in front of Maebe, then paced to the open window. Till stood angled away from the witches, but even as he trembled, he didn't reach to cling anyone. Maebe slowly undid the green cloak and let it fall to the floor under his feet. Oh, how magnificent! Look at that! It's so very rare to see a human hex cell. What was the cost, small human? Hannah buzzed in excitement at Till's reveal, but at her words his face crumpled in fear, fat tears sliding down his ruddy cheeks again. Ah, she mouthed towards Maebe. Zal had returned to the room, tail and head held high, with a plate of small cakes in his mouth. He placed them on the table before Till and nudged them towards him with a satisfied grunt. You thieving little... Hannah started. Hannah, Zala has sensed the child needs food right now. He looks as if he hasn't eaten well in days. And it's rare for Zala to take to somebody so fast, Charis said. She mirrored the movement of her familiar, pushing the plate forward and trying to smile at the silently sobbing human, leaving tear stains on the carpet. Charis, those might be a little too much for him, though. They have assa seed in them, Hannah whispered urgently. Maebe overheard and let out a barking laugh, leaving Mouse looking confused. Well, Charis stuttered. Maebe had rarely seen her at a loss for words. One will help the poor boy relax. I trust Zala's instincts, but could you go and prepare something more suitable for him, whilst I get the full story from these two? Maebe rushed through a shortened version of the story, without mention of the Era Shard or the Hedge Witch. Till relaxed a few minutes after eating and seated himself on the floor in front of the table, cramming his face with an assortment of snacks that Hannah had brought in for everyone. Seeds and nuts, an unfamiliar flatbread with a selection of dips, and a thick, juicy green plant cut into strips, which could also be dipped. Over all the food lay a thin, green shield coming from a crystal in the middle of the table that allowed hands to pass through, but kept the food fresh. When Till had finished eating, Zala crept close enough to curl up beside the boy. He gave the creature a wide stare, before stroking him between the ears and the abundance of crystals protruding from the top of his skull. It might be too late for the guild or even the city guard to do anything. They've probably already gone, Hannah mused. The month of the skull was a few nights ago, and I guess they used the night guild converts with them to drain extra power from the humans they sacrificed. But why come to the Green Kingdom? Maebe gaped, placing her honeybriar tea on the table. Warlocks roamed northeastern Nemain and the borders of Artio Forest. They hadn't been seen in the Green Kingdom for decades. The previous king had once attacked and sunk a ship of warlocks using an era crystal. No witches dared attack humans of the Green Kingdom whilst they were protected by such power. It was what made the country safe. I'd assume they want to use a human temple on human lands to amplify the power they're trying to steal. Rules of consent, Hannah informed her with a casual shrug. No one consents to be murdered, Maebe snapped. No, they don't, Charis replied. But if you extract power in a place that is significant to the person being drained, you can get a fraction more than if you steal them from their lands as well. It's not so much about gaining consent, but minimizing damage to the victim. The more you take from a person, the less they have to give. But what human temple? Cities have old temples, but the gods aren't as revered as they once were, Mouse said. There's all kinds of ruins left in the mountains after the witch wars. It doesn't have to be an active place. It'd be easy for them to travel with Night Guild deserters, hop through a portal, find an old temple, and some stray humans. Perfect circumstances for a bit of unholy star sacrificing, Hannah added. All the portals were destroyed generations ago, Maebe pointed out. Yeah? Hannah coughed, then sipped her tea. Charis gave her a meaningful side-eye, and Mouse frowned at the colourful witch. She was saved from further questions by a flitter buzzing in through the open window and landing in Mouse's lap. He flicked open the silver cage, skimming over the short note inside. Edic's here. The council have been notified and we're to go to the guild immediately. I'm sorry, but I need to leave now. Can we leave the boy here? Maebe asked, gesturing to Till, who had fallen asleep with his head on his plate and a hand on the Sphinx's head. Of course, Charis nodded. He will need a bath and new clothes, but we will watch him for a time. Charis clasped Maebe's hands tight in a grip, but didn't rise from her seat. Be safe, and come back soon. The door is always open for you. Above all else, remember to breathe. Maebe turned to leave, and Charis addressed Mouse directly. Prince Morsalus Elar, forgive me for not giving you a welcome befitting your station. I have never accommodated royalty in my home before. It was indeed a pleasure to put a face to the many, many stories my May has told me of you. Mouse frowned at Maebe, who had found something interesting on a nearby shelf to look at. I find you as honourable as she describes you, Charis finished, tilting her head, followed by Hannah, who looked shocked at her own small, clumsy curtsy, and frowned as a blossom appeared from the pink side of her head, then floated to the floor. Don't worry, I won't mention your lovely home to the Royal Guard. He gestured around the room rife with space magic. I should think not. This is all legal, Charis answered his cheek with a tap to the large crystal on her head. The Crystal Charter, daughter of the Red Seal.